Day after Christmas. It's a very busy travel day for people who have come to see the family or are leaving town for vacation time. So here at Westchester County Airport, we have a fair bit of business. And of course, to protect us, the members of the TSA, federally employed individuals, are here to provide security to make sure that nothing happens in our skies. We've had this security in effect for a long time, coming out of the 9/11 incident. And so these people who are working here are providing a service for us. Westchester County runs the airport. We contract with a company called Apports to provide the actual management of it day to day. The TSA operates outside of that authority with federal authority, as appropriately so. I just had a chance to speak, as you saw, to a few of the people who are here. They're working right now without compensation, as I understand. However this arrangement gets resolved with the federal government, we hope that there will be retroactive pay. These people are certainly providing a service. As you look at their tasks, even just for a few minutes, they have to show attention to detail to make sure that we're safe and that every person that gets on an airplane has confidence that the other people on the airplane mean no harm to their fellow passengers. As a county government, there's very little we can do directly, either in the negotiations or to compensate these people. So we have made the gesture through Apports to provide some lunch vouchers for the folks, or dinner vouchers for the people that come in. Just a small way to say thank you and to show our concern, but obviously we don't want to get involved in the middle of what they have to do every day, so that's why we couldn't go through a secure area to talk with them. I've served at the state level of government where we've had late budgets on a couple of occasions, and legislators don't get paid when there are late budgets, so I know what it's like not to be paid. In 2010, my salary was withheld from April 1st until August 3rd, and while I did get it back retroactively, I still had to make monthly payments on everything I owe, just like you, including my cable television bill and everything else in my world. And it's a stretch for all of us. So on a human being level, it's unfortunate that the people who work for the federal government become pawns in things like this. You know, the paying of the salary in the department, because there's no authorizing funding for that department, ought to be carved out of these kinds of things. So if there's going to be public policy debate and argument, this debate down in Washington could go a long time. The issue of the wall is a big issue, political issues we all know, but the people who work shouldn't have to suffer for that type of situation. We're fortunate in county government that we never faced this kind of a situation with a late budget or a disagreement that was so profound that we wouldn't pay employees, and that's not the way the county nor the local governments work. The state has moved away from late budgets very dramatically over the last 10 years compared to what it was for the 20 prior years. But unfortunately, we seem to see this happening more and more in the federal government, where the disagreement and ideology between both sides gets so protracted that we'll stop everything before we can resolve it. But as I said, that's not my area of responsibility. What we do want to do is, and I think we have briefly, is make a statement to these people here that we value the work they do. One of the people I spoke to said that he's here doing this because he's an American. He believes in doing this job that's here. So whether he's being paid for today or not, he's here to do that job, and I greatly respect that. That's the same spirit by which our first responders operate. The men and women you see in uniform, county officials, county police officials, and others, is the same spirit you see in our military. And I think that's what will get us through this crisis. While we disagree on policy, we disagree on politics, at the end of the day, we're still all Americans, and we still all understand that there's a certain level of service that we're required to provide our fellow Americans, and hopefully we will resolve this issue and get it done.
President Trump again said this morning that the federal workers support his shutdown. Did you get any sense from the TSA workers here in Westchester as to how they feel?
The topic didn't come up in my conversations. This is no time to politicize the individual workers. I don't know what the individual workers think. I can't imagine that that's an accurate description of the way they feel. Whether they do or don't support the wall is not relevant. They shouldn't have their pay held up because there's this disagreement.
Did you have any sense as to how the workers feel having to have work over this holiday season without getting a paycheck?
I have to tell you that the handful of people that I spoke to, their demeanor was positive. All of us complain about things in our lives that we don't like, and you would think working and not being paid for it would be one of those moments. But I didn't detect that the individuals here were resentful to be doing their job. and it's not a stand around do nothing job. As you can see, there's a steady flow of people coming through, and as busy as we are for a county airport, you can just imagine what this is like in LaGuardia, in JFK, in Newark, in LAX, in O'Hare, and in Atlanta and DFW, all the major airports of this country, that men and women like this are going to work today, and they're doing their job, they're doing their duty. So I have great respect for them. What I sense is that they're doing their duty and having faith that this will all be resolved in due time.
Who do you blame for the shutdown?
Well, I don't really blame anybody. I think the political process, and I think, Tony, you have to look maybe over 20 years, maybe 30, 25 years, has become so poisoned that when we disagree, we're prepared to constantly use the most extreme options available to us. We've had disagreements as a country since we began. Except for the Civil War, we found ways to resolve them amicably. But since on or about 1988 or so, we seem to be just insistent upon I get my way or it's the highway, or we use these extreme options rather than working through our disagreements. And obviously when you have a bicameral government at the state and the federal level, both houses of the government have to be in the same sync. The executive has to be in the same sync. This is my first year as an executive. I've served in the legislative bodies, and sometimes it's very difficult to understand how an executive feels because they have unitary power. They can pretty much do whatever they want. And in some cases they have the discretion to resolve a disagreement. In some cases they don't. But I think right now the blame, as I see it, is on an American political process that just won't work with each other. The hatred is so great for the other side that we just can't find a way to sit down and talk through deeply held differences and come to some degree of compromise, because any sort of compromise is going to be met by objections. And there are communication medium out there, not the ones that you represent, where there's talk radio and there's partisan vehicles and online and so forth that will destroy you if you compromise with the other side. And you can't run a country over the long haul like that. But for the moment, that's where we are. Michelle? Yes, in 2010, I was a state assemblyman, and the rules in Albany are that when a state budget is late, the pay of the legislators are withheld. Not all the employees of the state, just the state legislators, on the belief that the state legislature has to come to closure and agreement on the budget. The state legislators, when they have had late budgets, have held out because they couldn't get certain concessions from the governor. And in this particular year, in 2010, there was a structural disagreement between the leadership of the Assembly and the Senate and then Governor Patterson. It was resolved in August. But for the months of April, May, June, July, and for the first paycheck in August, I didn't receive a normal paycheck. It was very hard. I had no outside income as a legislator, and I still had to make monthly payments for bills. Obviously, I had a savings account, and I could use the savings account, but there was no special way to get around it. And when somebody would minimize it, and they'd say, "Oh, well, don't worry, you'll get your back pay," they weren't dealing with reality in my world, where I had to, function without a paycheck for a number of months. I don't know how long this is going to last for. We all hope it'll be resolved soon. But if it does last for months, those individuals will go through the same experience that I went through. And depending on how much resources they have accessible to them, people say things like, well, borrow money, which you pay interest for, and that's money that you don't get back. People can be very cavalier when it's somebody else's paycheck that's affected. And in this case, I've walked a mile in their moccasins, and it's an unpleasant mile. This is day, whatever it is of the shutdown, day 5, or I don't know how many days. It's a few days. But if this becomes a much more protracted problem, it will be a financial problem for these good people.
If it does last, are there possibilities of your having to curtail operations here at Westchester Airport?
Well, I think the federal government will determine whether or not they can provide these screening services. And I suspect, since the FAA controls the skies, and therefore through the federal government, if they don't feel that they can secure with the workforce that they have, maybe they'll still have a reduced workforce. I assume the potential to curtail those services are possible. But that's a decision that's going to be made by the federal administration. And look, the president can direct his agencies to do what he sees fit. He may do more than what he's doing right now. It's up to him. You're going to have a change in the House of Representatives leadership in the next few days. We'll see if that changes anything in the equation. Again, I follow the national scene like you do. I read, I try to be well versed on it, but I don't have any inside information. All I know is that our management here will respond to what happens, and if the federal government tells us that they can't provide security, and we can't provide the same operations, we're going to do what it is they direct us to do, because we're not in a position to operate it without the federal government's approval through the FAA. Any other questions? Guys, thank you very much again.